Hello, and welcome to a presentation on supporting sensory regulation in an early years setting. Let's get started. We are going to explore some ideas in adapting an early childhood environment to support sensory regulation. It's really helpful to have an understanding of what senses we have. There's actually 8 of them. We have a visual system, the auditory system, the olfactory system, the gustatory system, tactile system, vestibular, and the proprioceptive. When talking about sensory processing disorder, which is sensitivities, the interoceptive is very important and is often forgotten. That is the one that tells us when we're hungry, when we're thirsty. It controls our heart rate and our digestion. And it's more difficult to see and more difficult to understand. And young children who don't have vocabulary often struggle with being able to explain what is going on inside of our body. So offering language to that and having children become aware of where their body is in space by focusing on the other senses, and then we can loop that in and ask them before they eat, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? If you would like a drink of water, say, oh, when you really want water, you're very thirsty. That can help children start to get in touch with this system, or even just feeling their heart rate and say, oh, my heart is really pounding, or placing your hand gently on their chest with permission and saying, your heart is really pounding. Do you feel that? Do you feel yourself breathing? A mind-body awareness can really help children get in touch with this part of their senses. As I talked about in the last slide about being a sensory detective, of getting in touch with those internal systems of what you're feeling, hungry, thirsty, and also the emotional system. And that way you can better guesstimate what a child needs. Do they need to have some input? Do they need some sensory input? Do they need to go into a resting space and sit down and relax and calm their breathing? If they're breathing heavy, if it seems like their heart is pounding, bringing them back into their body. But us as the adult in the environment, as we are co-regulators, we need to walk them through that process and get to know the children in every aspect, knowing what they like to eat, knowing what they like to drink, and what things excite them will give us a better idea of how we can support them and direct them and guide them in becoming aware of their own senses. When talking about our environments, it is important that we look at it from the child's view. Get down on the child's level, sit on the floor in the room, and turn around while you're sitting and looking at everything that you're seeing. What does the light feel like? What does it look like? What colors jump out at you? Are there any sounds that you can hear by sitting in different areas of your classroom environment? When you're next to the windows, do you have an outside sound of birds, or do you have the outside sounds of traffic or sirens? And that can give you a hint in how that might impact some of the children in your community. Also, what does the carpet feel like? Is it rough? Is it smooth? Are there reflections that come in at certain times of the day off of mirrors that you might have? Or if you have a crystal hanging and it casts rainbows on the wall, being aware of when that happens because of where the sun is can also help redirect a child who might be dysregulated, and then that can help bring them back into regulation. It's one of those things that I really like to do, actually. And also understanding where the shadows hit. Or if you're sitting in a particular space, does the sun come into the room and then make you blinded because it's so bright inside of your eyes? Also being aware of that, because that can bring about sensitivities for everyone, and especially children who might have sensory processing disorder. Being observers of the children in your care will give you a lot of information. Sit back and watch for a minute sometimes, not just recording what's happening with their development intellectually, physically, emotionally. Look what's happening with their senses. What are they avoiding? What are they seeking out? What really gets them excited and or maybe overexcited? When do they seem to get overstimulated? When do they retreat away? At what point during the day do they might seem a little bit more tired, a little bit more run down? Do they get hungry earlier? Being aware of what's happening with your child, with the children in your care, with all of their senses is important to being able to support them for regulation of their central nervous system and keep them on track to have an enjoyable day. When doing a rotation time or having children engage in a very specific activity, it's beneficial to take a step back and look how children respond to that activity. Are they getting excited about that? Is that causing them to get overexcited because they're not able to focus about something else that's going around them? Do you need to bring in more information? Maybe it needs to be brighter colors to get them excited or engaged in that. And that's called the upregulate. What do you need to do then? Bring them up and get them into the activity, or do you need to downregulate? Do they get overly excited where they're not able to focus because there's just too many things happening at one time? Having that sweet spot of just the right amount of stimuli to keep them engaged is the important part of our work as an early years professional, and sitting back and allowing just a few minutes of observation during those activities, as well as the other people that are the other adults in the community. They can also offer insight if they can see. You can ask them from the outside, what has happened, and ask what they see. And they might give you a different perspective by standing back and watching what's happening and who is engaged and who isn't engaged. Having a space for children to be able to explore their senses and meet those needs is also really important. It's not just about that down space where they can go and regulate when they get too excited. It's also having that space available where they can move their large muscles and they can jump up and down and practice their balance and see how their body feels in space, as well as what do they taste. Lunchtime can be something very specific about what do you taste, what do you enjoy, is it smooth in your mouth, is it crunchy, but also intentional teaching moments of introducing smells with herbs and spices and even fruits. Before you eat them, you can smell them, or lemons. Does it smell? Does it taste? What happens when you squeeze the lemon and then you add water and a little bit of sugar? How does that feel? How does that feel differently on your tongue? And items that are cold versus items that are warm can also change the sensory experience. And you might find that some children really enjoy cold water while other children shy away from cold water. Making sure you have the time and the space to observe those activities is also really important in creating a sensory sensitive environment. So here we're talking a little bit more about food and diet and having an opportunity for children to taste a variety of foods intentionally as well as during mealtime, and being very mindful of what is happening with the food selection and eating intentionally. What does it feel like in your mouth? But then also, how does that impact their tummy? Do you notice that some children have a little bit of a bellyache after a certain food, or they have a tendency to eat a lot of food and they get very full with that food, and then sometimes that makes them a little sluggish in the afternoon if it's during lunchtime? And being aware of sensitivities when it comes to allergies, that is part of that sensory system in creating a sensitive environment for all children. Providing a variety of activities for all children is important to make sure everyone feels included. But if you have a particular child that happens to be averse to a particular sensory input, maybe they don't enjoy paint and they don't enjoy finger painting, and they get very upset if they get paint on their hands. Being sure that you have that child's favorite color when you're going to be introducing that can be very helpful to them, and say, oh look, see, we have purple here. I know how much you really like purple. Here's a brush that you can use. And being aware of their interests and what's important to them. And like the previous slide when we were talking about food, knowing which foods children enjoy and what they are inclined to can help get them engaged in maybe trying some other food. Using building blocks if they are adverse to using very small blocks that maybe there's a little bit of a difficulty with their pincer grasp, then you can introduce something that they really enjoy, like the Legos, or even small magnetiles. If you know that they like the big magnetiles and you can find the small magnetiles, that can get them more interested in doing some smaller fine motor movement. So really understanding the interests of each individual child and playing to that within a group activity to ensure that everybody is finding something to enjoy. Along with having the resources available for each individual child to meet their needs, also providing choices to expand out their repertoire of activities. Would you like to do this or that? And have many things available, but provide choices if a child is averse to doing one activity. And preferably, it's within the same kind of category of what you're doing to try and gently bring them into an activity that may be necessary for development for that particular child, whether it's using scissors or using a pencil. And you start out with a marker. If they're adverse to using a smaller pencil, then starting out with a marker and allowing them to have that choice of what they're drawing as opposed to dictating what they have to draw and write can encourage them to participate in an activity. So having a this or a that is very helpful for children when they're navigating their stimuli and they may not necessarily be as excited to participate. Keeping activities fun and engaging for the children in your community is also about watching the children and finding out what they enjoy. Follow the child, follow the child, follow the child, follow their interests, and then build activities around the interests of either a small group of children and inviting them to come into it, or an individual child and inviting them. And that will often, when one person is doing that, often encourages other people to follow along. So keeping things fun, fresh, and engaging for children is as easy as following their interest. And that goes back to observing the children and what's happening with them and what they are attracted to. Encouraging children towards a sense of independence to meet their own sensory needs is also really important when it comes to being able to self regulate. Understanding that an infant understands that they're hungry and they're crying because they have a sensation. So, when you meet that need for the infant and preparing a bottle for them and giving them the bottle, having them hold it as soon as they're capable, talking to them. Oh, it sounds like you're hungry. This may help you feel better as they're taking in the bottle. Oh, you must feel so much better now that you have something in your tummy. And even toddlers, as they're going on and they're sitting at the table, oh, you sound hungry. And then they're meeting their own needs by having something to eat. That is very baseline, meeting their own needs. But that can then move into other things. Oh, and as they get older, they might say that their tummy hurts. Oh, are you hungry? Or is something else happening inside their body? And they'll be able to identify hunger or perhaps something else that might be going on inside of their body. And if they're feeling their heart rate after they've been running, oh, I see your heart is pounding and you're out of breath. How does that feel? Let's take a big deep breath to get more oxygen in. And then they're realizing, oh, I can regulate my own heart rate. I can regulate my own breathing. And that, as it goes on, can move into a more intentional mind body practice where they can take that deep breath independently. They can move away and take a sensory break independently. We all need to be able to do that. We all can get into overwhelm with a lot of extra stimuli. And modeling that for children can help them pick it up quickly too. One of the best ways to support emotional well being in child and sensory regulation is providing a very predictable schedule and routine and having it be consistent from day to day and from week to week. There might be times where there needs to be a little bit of a change to the schedule if there's a holiday or if there's a birthday celebration in the class. Then mentioning that to the children at the beginning of the day, oh, today the schedule is going to be a little bit different because we're going to do this. Or perhaps it's too wet to go outside because it rained overnight, and preparing the children for, we're not going to be able to go outside today because it rained really hard and it's too wet to go outside today. That can also help children understand what's happening, and then they have the ability to process that information with you standing there going, oh yeah, that's disappointing. Having a conversation about how much you wanted to go outside and you know that they really want to go outside and it is disappointing. However, we are going to be able to do something different. We're not being able to go outside. So today we're going to set up a big mural painting on the large table, and everyone will get an opportunity to put their hands and maybe even their feet on the large mural. And we can turn those murals into we can turn those handprints into animals. And Telling the children in advance if something's going to change is vital. It allows them to switch gears slowly. Children don't always process information as quickly as adults do. So when we give information to them, give a minute and see if they are able to process that information. They might actually have more questions about what's happening. And when the schedule is predictable, they know what's expected of them. And when they know what is expected of them, they can meet those expectations, which is what keeps peace within our community, is when people are able to stay within the social boundaries of a community. When children walk in, they know that out in the hallway, they put their shoes away, they hang up their coat, they come into the classroom, they greet the adult to let them know that they're there. And as older children, they know that they need to check in with the attendance sheet and write their names. That might be part of your check-in for the day for older students. That also helps them say, I'm important, I'm present, I'm here. And they do that every day. And going through the same schedule allows them to anticipate and maybe be excited about something. Or if they're not so excited about it, they might be able to share that with you in advance. And that gives you the opportunity to create something, maybe a different choice for that child if they're not really feeling up to doing an activity that day that they know is consistent. We all know it's a little difficult to always keep calm in an early years environment. There's a lot going on, and it's up to us, the adults in the community, to set that example of what it means to be calm and patient and supportive when it comes to um, supporting children to have their sensory inputs met and what that means to them. If we have a big reaction to some sort of change, that's telling the child, oh, this requires a big reaction. If we have a low key reaction, the child is then going to passively learn, oh, this requires a low key reaction. We need to behave this way in this situation. If during nap time, if a child gets up early and they go to use materials while the other children are sleeping, they will be able to, if you are calm and quiet, they will be calm and quiet. If you are whispering, they will be more likely to whisper. When children are really loud and rambunctious, one of the ways to pull that energy down is for you to stay really calm, take a deep breath, and speak very quietly to the group of children. And generally speaking, most often they will then become very quiet themselves because you're modeling what's accepted, what is expected of them at that moment. Also, keeping track of your own mental health. What's going on within you? Are you feeling overwhelmed? If you're feeling overwhelmed, finding that time to take a drink of cold water. If you've got cold water in the classroom, taking a drink of that cold water. If you have a different cup of tea that you have in the classroom, finding a moment to step away, drink that cup of tea, and then also regulating your own central nervous system. And sometimes it's okay, just like the children need to go to the limited sensory activity area. Some people call it a rest basket, the peace corner, whatever it's called. You may need to have that opportunity too. And it's okay to model that in front of the children. If you have the opportunity and you're feeling a little out of sorts, sitting down in the book corner, taking a book out and reading it, you might find that other children will sit there and read quietly with you. Or they might ask you, what are you doing? And you could say, I was feeling a little out of sorts, so I decided to sit down and read this book. Would you like to join me? And often the children will want to join you in that activity. But if you're not able to keep calm, if you're not able to stay patient and positive, take a step out, take a deep breath, shake it off, and come back in. And that's really the best thing that we can do for children, is to keep ourselves calm, to be patient with ourselves, to be patient with others, and to be positive that this is all just a learning process. Everybody is showing up, doing the best they can to be the best versions of themselves in that moment. And sometimes that means we need to co-regulate with the children. Sometimes we need to co-regulate with each other as staff members, and as laterals, the two adults in the classroom can say, whew, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed today. That is really okay. That will keep you calm, and then that keeps the children calm. It makes a much easier environment for the children. Providing activities that support a child's strength is imperative in an early years environment. Yes, we want to challenge them into developing. Yes, we want to help them grow and move them along the developmental path, but also feeling the win, feeling something that they're capable of, that they're able to do successfully, that they're not yet bored with, will help keep them regulated and helps keep their esteem up where they don't feel like they're constantly being challenged and they're unsuccessful. Being sure to have activities that the children can be successful with inside of every day, inside of each activity. If an activity is particularly challenging, starting with an activity that you know that they can do and then build on that activity so that it becomes progressively more difficult. And so it doesn't feel as challenging because they have little wins along the way that allow them to get to this end result of something that may have been very challenging for them. And also, when they are feeling challenged, allow them to take a step back and have an opportunity to do something that is just fun for them, that is just easy for them. There's nothing wrong with having something be easy for a little while during the day. That goes for us as adults too. If there's something that's particularly challenging to you when you are presenting to children, break it down for yourself. Break it down into easy steps for you, and then you will find that you can share that with the children, and the children will build on that with you. And it's really lovely to have that growth time together. When you have to make changes to your environment, if you have a child that is new to the environment and coming in and joining, and they do have some different needs than what's already set up, make those changes little by little. Having a big, drastic change in the environment can be disruptive to everyone, including the child who does have the individual needs. Taking it just one small step at a time. When you walk into a new space, even as adults, we walk into a new space, and if everything's changed, it's a little disruptive and we're not really sure where to go. So being sure that you only change one corner, I always say one corner of the classroom at a time, and children will be drawn to that because there is a change and they do want to explore it, but then they can also have this place that's very predictable and feels very safe to them. A child who does have sensory processing disorder, or if something is really disruptive to them, like really bright lights, try turning, just if you have blinds over the windows, turning the blinds on the windows, and so there's not as much outside light. Or open those blinds all the way up, and during the brightest part of the day, turn the overhead lights off, and that brings that lighting down for the children. That is less disruptive to them. When something happens gradually, little by little, it's just like breaking down an activity, going little by little, one step at a time. If we're making changes inside the environment, we also want to take that same approach. When having children with special needs, or any children in the classroom community, it's really important to play to a child's strengths, looking at what a child does well, as opposed to just looking at what he needs for support. What are the child's different abilities? What are classified as disabilities? Treat the child as a whole person, not as their diagnostic label. It's the whole child. All children do something well. While they might be challenged by some things, there's so many things that they can do well, and many ways that they can contribute into the classroom. If they are more sensorially sensitive and they do have to excuse themselves to be able to regulate, when they are within the community, look at how they are participating. Look at the growth. Is there a number of minutes that they've been able to stay within a group activity where they weren't able to participate before? Are they able to more quickly self-regulate? That's a strength. That's really hard to do. And focusing on the growth aspect, what their strengths are, helps keep a better perspective of the whole person and the whole child. Incorporating sensory play into every aspect of the learning environment, remembering that there are those 8 aspects of the sensory system, and what part of those are you incorporating in each activity that you're doing. Being able to call that out and identify that to children also helps them identifying it, giving it the language. Oh, how does this feel in your tummy? Oh, are you able to balance on the balancing board? Are you able to stand on one foot and maintain your balance? How does that feel on your hands? How does that feel on your feet? I was in that classroom with a child once, and they were stepping on a Lego, And I said, oh, doesn't that hurt your feet? It hurts my feet when I step on Legos. And the Lego can get broken if you are standing on it. So then we found something that the child could put their feet on. And that's really what they were doing. They were sensory seeking for the bottom of their feet. And once we were able to do that in a way that was appropriate, that wasn't a Lego, in a way that was appropriate, the child very quickly went through that. They got that need met and they moved on. So having those options available in every aspect of the classroom is very helpful. This is a few reminders of the ways that we can support the sensory development through exploration. Calling out to them, what are you feeling? What does this feel like in your hands, in your mouth, on your feet? When they're chewing, what does it chew like? Is it crunchy? Is it smooth? Is it difficult to push? Is it difficult to pull? Are you challenged by pulling that? Can you stack those up? How high can you stack them? And rolling, oh, look how far you were able to roll that, and it rolled in a straight line. Or if you're using a rolling pin on some dough, look how flat it's becoming. It is becoming so flat when you push and roll, and squeezing it, and you can squeeze really firmly and put your fingers into it and it squishes between your fingers, or you can squeeze with your fingers together and you can turn it into a ball. And even shaking and hearing, oh, what does that sound like? What's inside of there? Versus something else, what does that sound like? Does that sound like it has bigger or smaller things inside? And then opening it up and seeing inside, oh, this one had really small beans in it, and this one had very large plastic blocks inside of it. Or maybe it's the difference between wooden blocks and plastic blocks. How do they feel in the hand? And then when you put them in a container, how does it sound inside the container? And that is a way to help a child understand their environment even better and what things sound like and feel like. This is not the end of any sort of sensory exploration or ideas. This is just the beginning. It's just the tip of the iceberg. It has been presented to you, hopefully in a way that sparks your curiosity. What feels good to you? What are you curious about? And then going into doing more research, talking to other colleagues about what they enjoy, what they've noticed that their children enjoyed, whether younger children or older children. When it comes to sensory exploration, it doesn't necessarily have to be age contingent. There is ways for developing the senses little by little. There's also going back and revisiting those earlier lessons and having that sense of, oh, I did it. Don't be afraid to go back into your old bag of tricks and pull something out and make it fresh and new for the particular child or children that you're working with in this moment. If it's not something that you've done this year, feel free, bring it out, make it new, and continue to build upon that repertoire of sensory stimulation for the all-important sensory development and the ability to check in and have mind-body wellness. Thank you so much for listening and going through the slides with me on the supporting sensory regulation in the early years environment. The idea of stimulating the senses and getting in touch with your body through the senses really helps us develop as human beings, and everything that's available in nature, that list is exhaustive. Like we said before, there are so many different directions that you can go with this to stimulate all of these senses, and not forgetting that all important one that is on the list that many people forget about, and checking in with the tummy. How does the tummy feel? How is the heart rate feeling? And having that connection will lead to lifelong wellness and learning, and hopefully curiosity of wanting to connect with nature and our bodies.